Harlem, 2:47 a.m., January 1935. The payphone on 126th Street rang 3 times before anyone picked up. A hand reached through cigarette smoke. A voice asked a question, and somewhere in that question was a name that didn't belong in Harlem. A Russian name. Not loud, not shouted, just there. In the wrong conversation, at the wrong hour, near the wrong ears. 48 hours later, federal files started moving. No headlines, no raids, just a quiet shift in the machinery. Surveillance cars parked longer, informants asked different questions, and phones that used to ring twice now rang 6 times before anyone answered. By the 3rd day, the word in Harlem wasn't about what the FBI knew. It was about who told them. A match struck in the back booth of a late-night diner. The man who lit it didn't look worried, but the silence around him said everything. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand who Bumpy Johnson was in 1935. Harlem in 1935 wasn't loud the way people remember it. It was careful. The parties still happened, the clubs still filled, but underneath the music and the laughter, there was a different rhythm. The rhythm of money moving quietly, of debts settled before they became problems, of arrangements that never made it into police reports. Bumpy Johnson wasn't the loudest name in that world. He was the one people whispered about when the loud names weren't listening. He didn't run the numbers empire like a general. He ran it like an accountant who understood leverage. Every envelope, every handshake, every favor owed. He built a network that didn't just move money. It moved information, and in Harlem, information was the difference between staying open and getting shut down. The community knew it, even if they didn't say it out loud. The shop owners who paid protection weren't paying for muscle. They were paying for stability, for the kind of order that kept the wrong people from asking the wrong questions. The night workers, the doormen, the cleaning crews, they all understood the rhythm. As long as the money moved smooth, the streets stayed calm. But in January 1935, something changed. It started small. A tenant named Clara Washington noticed it first. She worked the coat check at the Lenox Social Club 6 nights a week, same corner booth for tips. She'd been there long enough to know the difference between a busy night and a tense one. And lately, the nights felt tense. Men who used to laugh at the bar now checked the door twice before they sat down. Envelopes that used to get passed with a nod now required a second conversation in the back hallway. Clara didn't ask questions, but she noticed, and noticing was enough. The FBI didn't announce investigations in 1935. They didn't need to. A name in the wrong file was enough to change the temperature of an entire neighborhood. And in January, a name appeared. Not in a headline, not in a courtroom, in a surveillance report filed by a low-level bureau clerk who'd been told to listen to pay phone conversations near certain Harlem intersections. The name was foreign. Russian, most likely. It appeared once in a fragment of a conversation that was never fully recorded. The report didn't explain who said it or why. It just noted the proximity. The name was mentioned within 2 blocks of a known policy operation, and that was enough. Within 48 hours, the file moved up 3 desks. By the end of the week, 2 agents were reassigned to Harlem monitoring duty. The machinery didn't move loudly, but it moved. Some accounts suggest the name itself was a mistranslation, a nickname, a code, a misheard phrase. Others say it was real, and that someone in Harlem had made a connection that wasn't supposed to exist. The records are unclear, but what's certain is this. Once that name reached the bureau, the pressure started building. And pressure in Harlem always found the cracks. And that's where the story turns. The first crack appeared in the 3rd week of January. A federal surveillance team started showing up on 135th Street. Not every night, but enough nights that people noticed. They didn't knock on doors. They didn't stop anyone. They just watched. Notebooks, cameras, long shifts. And that kind of attention made people nervous. Bumpy noticed it the way he noticed everything, through the small changes. A regular pickup got delayed. A contact asked to meet somewhere new. A phone call that should have taken 30 seconds took 4 minutes. Nothing catastrophic, just friction. And friction, if you didn't handle it, turned into panic. Harlem's underground economy in 1935 ran on trust, but it was built on math. Every week, thousands of small bets moved through the policy system, numbers games, small stakes wagers, neighborhood pools. Most of it was nickels and dimes. But nickels and dimes, multiplied across thousands of players, became real money. And real money required infrastructure. Runners collected the bets. Clerks recorded the numbers. Lookouts watched for badges. And someone, usually someone smart, someone calm, someone who understood the rhythm, made sure the whole system stayed invisible. Bumpy's role wasn't to run every corner. It was to make sure the corners ran smooth. That meant solving problems before they became crises. A debt that couldn't be paid? Work out a schedule. A runner skimming too much? Replace him quietly. A cop asking too many questions? Find out who he talked to and offer him a reason to talk less. The system worked because everyone understood the stakes. If the money stopped moving, people lost jobs. Families lost income. Landlords started evicting. Harlem didn't have safety nets in 1935. It had arrangements, and those arrangements depended on one thing: no one looking too close. But in January, the FBI started looking, not at the money itself. They didn't care about nickels and dimes. They cared about the name. And if that name connected to something bigger, something that crossed state lines, something that touched federal jurisdiction, then the whole system was at risk. Bumpy understood that before anyone else did. The question wasn't whether the Bureau would find something. The question was, who gave them a reason to look? And that's where the story turns. Across town, in a quieter part of Manhattan, a different kind of meeting was happening. The man who called the meeting didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His name was Arthur Devine, though most people just called him the Collector. He worked for interests that didn't advertise themselves. Out-of-town money, political fixers, the kind of people who preferred contracts to headlines. And in January 1935, those interests had a problem. Bumpy Johnson was too organized, too careful, too good at keeping Harlem's underground economy running without creating the kind of chaos that drew federal attention. But now the FBI had heard a name, and if that name led somewhere uncomfortable, if it suggested connections that crossed the wrong lines, then maybe Bumpy wasn't as careful as people thought. Maybe he was vulnerable. And vulnerable meant opportunity. Devine didn't want Bumpy arrested. He wanted him boxed in, wanted him making mistakes, wanted him losing trust, wanted him stretched thin enough that someone else could step in and reorganize the whole operation under new management. The plan wasn't complicated. Find someone inside Bumpy's orbit, someone close enough to touch paper, someone who handled schedules, envelopes, phone calls, someone with a weakness. Offer them a way out of that weakness, and then, quietly, turn them into a pipeline. Not for raids, not for arrests, just for whispers. The kind of whispers that kept the Bureau interested. The kind that made allies hesitate. The kind that turned smooth operations into nervous ones. Devine had already identified the target. A man named Leonard Pitts. Clerk, runner, low level, but positioned right. He handled routing slips for certain pickups. He knew which nights money moved heavy. He'd been around long enough to know names, but not long enough to have built the kind of loyalty that couldn't be broken. And he had a problem, a gambling debt, not to Bumpy's operation. That would have been manageable. To someone outside Harlem, someone who didn't care about rhythm or reputation, someone who just wanted cash and wanted it now. Devine had bought that debt 2 weeks ago. Now he owned Leonard Pitt's problem, and soon He'd own Leonard Pitts. The first approach happened on a Tuesday afternoon outside a diner on 8th Avenue. Leonard was halfway through a cigarette when Devine sat down next to him. No introduction, no threat. Just a calm voice and a plain envelope. "I bought something that belongs to you," Devine said. "Thought you'd want to know." Leonard's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Devine didn't wait for a response. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, a ledger entry showing Leonard's debt in clean typed numbers. "You owe $430, Devine said, "to people who don't take installments." Leonard's throat tightened. "I'm working on it." Devine smiled. "I know you are. That's why I'm here." A pause. "I'm not asking you to do anything loud. I'm not asking you to steal. I'm just asking you to remember things." Leonard didn't ask what kind of things. He didn't need to. "I can't." "You don't have to decide now," Devine said. "But the people you owe, they're deciding for you. And their decision has a deadline." Devine stood up, left the envelope on the bench, walked away. Leonard sat there, cigarette burning down to his fingers, staring at the numbers on the page. He told himself he wouldn't do it, but he didn't throw the envelope away. Every operation, no matter how tight, has a human vulnerability. Not a flaw in the system, a flaw in the person holding the system together. Leonard Pitts wasn't a bad man. He wasn't greedy. He wasn't disloyal by nature. But he was afraid. Fear is a lever, and if you know where to place it, you can move almost anything. Leonard's fear wasn't abstract. It was specific. The image of two men showing up at his apartment, the sound of his door splintering, the look on his wife's face when she realized he couldn't protect her. He'd borrowed money to cover a bet he thought was safe. It wasn't, and now the debt had grown teeth. Devine understood this. He didn't need Leonard to be a traitor. He just needed him to be tired. Desperate, willing to make one small compromise in exchange for breathing room. The brilliance of the approach was its gentleness. No threats, no violence, just an offer. "Help me remember a few things and I'll make your problem go away." What Devine didn't say, what he never said, was that the first favor would lead to a second, and the second to a third, and by the time Leonard realized he was in too deep, the exit would be gone. Some accounts suggest Leonard resisted for nearly 2 weeks. Others say he folded after the second conversation. The records are unclear, but what's certain is this. By the end of January, Leonard Pitts started noticing things he hadn't noticed before. And when Devine asked him to share those things, Leonard stopped saying no. And that's where the story turns. The second meeting happened in a parked car late at night, 3 blocks from Leonard's apartment. Devine didn't ask for much, just small details. Who's moving money on Thursday nights? Which routes get checked twice? Any new names in the rotation? Leonard answered carefully. Told himself it wasn't real information, just observations. Things anyone could see if they paid attention. But Devine wrote everything down. And 2 days later, one of those details, a name, a location, a time, made it into a bureau surveillance report. Leonard didn't know that. He just knew the debt was shrinking, and that, for now, his door stayed locked. But Leonard wasn't invisible. A man named Marcus Webb had been working Bumpy's operation for 6 years. He wasn't management. He wasn't flashy. He was a driver, a pickup man, the kind of person who noticed when things didn't line up. And lately, things weren't lining up. Small things. A route that got changed at the last minute, even though no one called it in. A question from a cop that felt too specific. A timing gap that didn't make sense unless someone had tipped the schedule. Marcus didn't say anything at first, but he started watching Leonard. The first confrontation happened in a stairwell after a late pickup. You talked to anyone new lately? Marcus asked. Leonard's face stayed neutral. What do you mean? I mean someone asking questions, someone you maybe shouldn't be answering. I don't know what you're talking about. Marcus leaned in. If you got a problem, you bring it inside. You don't take it to strangers. Leonard met his eyes. I don't have a problem. Marcus didn't believe him, but he didn't have proof. Not yet. Meanwhile, Clara Washington kept noticing. The Lennox Social Club used to feel like a celebration 6 nights a week. Now it felt like a waiting room. Men checked their watches more. Conversations ended when she walked past. The tips were smaller, the smiles tighter. One Friday night, a regular, a man who usually tipped $1 and told jokes, left without saying a word. Clara asked the bartender what was wrong. The bartender just shook his head. People are nervous, he said. That's all. Nervous about what? About staying out of files. Clara didn't ask what that meant. She just felt the weight of it. The whole neighborhood felt it. Like a storm building on the horizon, slow and inevitable. An offer, delivered correctly, doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like relief. Divine understood this better than most. He didn't push Leonard. He didn't rush him. He just made the path clear. Keep sharing small details, and the debt disappears. Stop sharing, and the collectors come back. The brilliance of the offer was its simplicity. Leonard didn't have to betray anyone directly. He didn't have to lie or steal or sabotage. He just had to remember things, and remembering felt safe. Until it wasn't. By mid-February, Leonard was sharing details twice a week. Pickup schedules, route changes, names that came up in passing. Most of it seemed harmless, but Divine was building something with those details, a map. Not of the money itself, but of the rhythm, the way information moved, the way Bumpy's network operated, the small gaps between orders and execution, and once you had the rhythm, you could disrupt it. A surveillance car in the right place at the right time. A question asked to the right person. A delay that turned a smooth night into a tense one. Divine wasn't trying to destroy Bumpy's operation. He was trying to make it fragile, and fragile operations made mistakes. The 4th meeting happened in the same parked car. Divine handed Leonard an envelope. Inside was a receipt. The debt marked paid in full. Leonard stared at it. We're done? He asked. Divine smiled. Almost. A pause. There's one more thing I need. Leonard's stomach dropped. You said... I said the debt's paid. And it is. But now we're talking about something else. Divine's voice stayed calm. There's a name I need you to listen for. If you hear it, I need to know when, where, and who said it. What name? Divine wrote it on a slip of paper, handed it to Leonard. Leonard read it, felt his chest tighten. It was the Russian name, the one that started all of this. I can't. You already did, Divine said quietly. The debt's gone. But the favors, those don't stop until I say they stop. Leonard sat in silence, realized for the first time that the door had already closed behind him. And that's where the story turns. Leonard Pitt spent the next 3 days trying to convince himself he still had a choice. He told himself he could stop, walk away, disappear, leave Harlem entirely if he had to. But every time he thought about running, he thought about his wife, about the apartment they'd worked 2 years to afford, about the neighbors who'd vouched for them when the landlord wanted references, about the life they'd built, brick by brick, in a city that didn't hand out second chances. Running meant losing all of that, and staying meant... He didn't let himself finish the thought. Instead, he went to work, kept his head down, moved paper, took calls, pretended everything was normal. But it wasn't. Because now, every conversation felt like a test. Every name mentioned in passing felt like a trap. And the Russian name, the one Devine had written on that slip of paper, kept appearing in places Leonard didn't expect. Not in files, in jokes, in rumors, in the kind of late-night backroom talk that Leonard wasn't supposed to be listening to. And every time he heard it, he felt Devine's eyes on him, even when Devine wasn't there. The second confrontation with Marcus happened outside a barber shop on Lenox Avenue. Marcus didn't make small talk this time. He just stepped in front of Leonard, blocked his path, and said, "You're making people nervous." Leonard tried to step around him. Marcus didn't move. "I'm not doing anything." "That's the problem," Marcus said. "You're not doing anything different, but things are changing. Routes, timing, questions showing up in the wrong places. I don't control that." "No, but someone does. And I'm starting to think you know who." Leonard's jaw tightened. "You got something to say? Say it." Marcus leaned in close. "If you got a problem, you bring it to Bumpy. You don't handle it yourself. And you sure as hell don't handle it with strangers. I told you, I'm not." "Then prove it." Marcus stepped back, gave Leonard one last look, then walked away. Leonard stood on the sidewalk, heart pounding, trying to figure out how much Marcus actually knew, and how long he had before everyone else figured it out too. Clara noticed Leonard that same week. He came into the Lenox Social Club late one Thursday, sat at the bar, and ordered a drink he didn't touch. Clara had seen that look before, the look of a man trying to disappear while sitting in plain sight. She didn't say anything, but she remembered. Because in Harlem in 1935, remembering people was how you stayed safe. The pressure escalated again the following Tuesday. Devine didn't call Leonard this time. He just showed up, walked into the diner where Leonard ate lunch, sat down across from him and said, "I need the schedule for Friday night." Leonard's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "I don't have access to that." "Yes, you do." Devine's voice was flat, matter of fact. "And I need it by tomorrow. I can't." "You can. Or I make a phone call and your wife finds out exactly how the debt got paid." Leonard felt the room tilt. "You said we were done." "I said the debt was paid. This is something else." Devine leaned back. "You're useful, Leonard, and useful people don't get to retire until I say so." He stood up, left $1 on the table for Leonard's coffee, walked out. Leonard sat there, staring at the dollar, feeling the trap close tighter. By mid-February, Leonard had stopped sleeping well. He'd wake up at 3 a.m., convinced he heard footsteps in the hallway. He'd check the locks twice, 3 times. His wife asked him what was wrong. He told her it was work stress. She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. And Leonard kept moving paper, kept answering Devine's questions, kept pretending he wasn't drowning. But Bumpy already had the first receipt. Bumpy Johnson didn't trust instinct. He trusted patterns. And by the second week of February, the pattern was clear. 3 times in 10 days, federal surveillance had appeared in places they shouldn't have known about. Not raids, not arrests, just presence. A car parked outside a building where a meeting was scheduled. A plainclothes agent asking questions at a corner store 2 hours before pickup. A phone line that started crackling with interference the day before a significant cash movement. Coincidence didn't happen 3 times in 10 days. Someone was talking. The question was, who? Bumpy didn't panic. He built a map. He started with information flow. Who knew what, and when did they know it? Most operations leaked because someone talked too much at the wrong time. But this was different. This wasn't loose lips in a bar. This was precise, timely, targeted, which meant someone was sharing information deliberately, and that meant they were getting something in return. Bumpy's network wasn't loud, but it was wide. Doormen, clerks, taxi drivers, cleaning crews, people who heard things and knew how to pass them along without making noise. He put the word out quietly. Pay attention to who's asking questions. Not cops, not feds, civilians, strangers, people offering favors that didn't make sense. Within 48 hours, he had 3 names. One of them was Leonard Pitts. The report came from a taxi driver who'd seen Leonard sitting in a parked car late at night, 3 blocks from his apartment, talking to a man the driver didn't recognize. Not unusual on its own, but the driver remembered the car. Same car, same block, 3 different nights. Bumpy didn't move immediately. He tested first. He fed Leonard a false detail, a pickup location that didn't exist on a night when nothing was scheduled. Told only Leonard. Waited. 48 hours later, a federal surveillance car parked outside the fake location. Sat there for 90 minutes, then left. Bumpy didn't need more proof than that, but he wanted the full picture. So he set a second test. This time he fed Leonard a real location, but changed the time by 2 hours. If Leonard was the leak, the surveillance would show up early. And it did. Federal car. 2 agents parked outside the building at the wrong time, waiting for something that wouldn't happen for another 120 minutes. Some accounts suggest Bumpy felt anger when he confirmed the leak. Others say he felt something colder, clarity. The records are unclear, but what's certain is this. Once Bumpy knew who was talking, he didn't rush to stop it. He decided to use it, and that's where the story turns. Bumpy's next move wasn't confrontation. It was construction. If Leonard was feeding information to someone outside, then that someone had a purpose. And that purpose, most likely, wasn't about making arrests. Arrests were loud, public, hard to control. This felt different. This felt like pressure, like someone trying to make Bumpy's operation fragile enough to take over. Which meant the person running Leonard wasn't law enforcement. They were competition, and competition could be outmaneuvered. Bumpy called a quiet meeting with 3 people he trusted. Marcus Webb, a numbers coordinator named Estelle Price, and a lawyer named Harold Duncan who specialized in reading situations most people missed. The meeting happened in a 4th-floor walk-up on a 132nd Street, late on a Wednesday night. No one took notes. Bumpy laid out the situation in 3 sentences. We have a leak. The leak is feeding someone outside, and that someone is using the feds to box us in. Marcus started to speak. Bumpy raised a hand. I know who it is. That's not the problem. Then what is? Estelle asked. The problem, Bumpy said, is that if we shut him down now, they'll just find someone else, and next time, we won't know who. Harold leaned forward. So what do you want to do? Bumpy's voice stayed calm. I want to feed him something he can't resist. Something big enough that whoever's running him has to move on it. A pause. And when they move, we see who they are. Marcus frowned. You're talking about bait. I'm talking about control, Bumpy said. Right now, they think they're running the game. I want them confident. I want them committed. And then, Bumpy's eyes didn't blink. Then we spring the trap, in public, in front of witnesses, in a way they can't walk back. Over the next 10 days, Bumpy's network moved carefully. They started by feeding Leonard a series of small, accurate details, just enough to keep Divine's confidence high. Then they planted the big one, a meeting, supposedly high level, supposedly sensitive. Bumpy meeting with an out-of-town contact to discuss a new arrangement. The location? A private dining room at the Lenox Social Club. The time? 11 p.m., Friday night. Leonard received the information on a Thursday afternoon. By Thursday night, Divine had it. And by Friday morning, Divine was making calls. The intelligence came through Bumpy's network in fragments. A bartender overheard a phone conversation. A doorman noticed 2 unfamiliar men casing the block outside the club. A taxi driver reported a car that had been circling the area since 9 p.m. Bumpy didn't react. He just confirmed what he already suspected. Divine was planning to use the meeting as Leverage. Probably not a raid. More likely a confrontation. A power play. A moment to force Bumpy into a corner in front of people who mattered. But Bumpy had already built the counter. The meeting Leonard knew about. It was real. But it wasn't the meeting Divine thought it was. A trap only works if the target believes they're in control. Divine believed he was in control. He had Leonard. He had the schedule. He had the location. He thought he was walking into a moment of vulnerability. Bumpy, caught in a compromising meeting, forced to negotiate. What Divine didn't know was that Bumpy had built 2 meetings. One visible, one invisible. The visible meeting was exactly what Leonard described. Bumpy, sitting in the private dining room at the Lennox Social Club, with a man who appeared to be an out-of-town contact. The invisible meeting was everyone else. Marcus Webb, positioned near the entrance. Estelle Price, seated in the main room with a clear view of the door. Harold Duncan, standing near the bar, watching faces. And spread throughout the club, doormen, waiters, coat check workers, regulars who knew how to pay attention without looking like they were paying attention. The room wasn't a negotiation, it was a courtroom, and Leonard Pitts, walking in at 10:53 p.m., didn't realize he was about to be the defendant. Divine arrived 7 minutes later. He didn't walk in alone. 2 men flanked him, well-dressed, calm, the kind of men who carried authority without needing to announce it. The club went quiet. Not silent, just attentive. Clara Washington, working the coat check, felt the shift immediately. The laughter stopped. The conversation softened. Everyone was watching, even the people pretending not to watch. Divine walked toward the private dining room. Bumpy was sitting at the head of the table, a glass of water in front of him, no expression on his face. The out-of-town contact, a man named Samuel Reeves, who worked logistics for a Philadelphia operation, sat to his right. Divine stopped in the doorway. "Mr. Johnson," he said, "I think we need to talk." Bumpy didn't stand. "I don't know you." "You know enough," Divine said. "You know the feds are watching. You know someone's been talking, and you know that if this keeps going, your entire operation becomes a liability." Bumpy's expression didn't change. "Is that a threat?" "It's a business observation." Divine stepped into the room. "I'm here to offer you a solution. You step back. Let someone else handle the administrative side of things. Someone with cleaner connections. Someone the feds aren't interested in." A pause. "And in exchange, you keep your reputation. Keep your income. Just share the oversight." Bumpy let the words hang in the air. Then he said very quietly, "And who do you work for?" Divine smiled. "People who prefer not to be named." Bumpy nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." He looked past Divine toward the doorway. "Leonard, come in here." Leonard, who'd been standing in the hallway, frozen, stepped into the room. His face was pale. Divine's smile faded. Bumpy's voice stayed calm. "Tell Mr. Divine what you told me 2 hours ago." Leonard's throat worked. He didn't speak. "Go ahead," Bumpy said. "Tell him about the test." Leonard's eyes dropped. Divine's posture shifted. Bumpy leaned forward. "See, the thing about leaks, Mr. Divine, is they only work if the information is real. But if the information is controlled..." He let the sentence trail off. "Every detail Leonard gave you for the past 10 days, I gave him first. Watched where it went. Watched who moved on it. And now I know exactly who you work for, how you operate, and what you thought you could take." A pause. "You walked into my house thinking you had leverage, but you walked in on a stage, and everyone here just watched you try." Divine's jaw tightened. Bumpy stood, looked at Leonard, then back at Divine, and delivered the line that would echo through Harlem for years. "A man talks, paper remembers." The room froze. Divine didn't move immediately. He was calculating, looking for an exit, a counter, some way to salvage the situation. But there wasn't one. Bumpy had built the trap too carefully. The entire room had just watched Divine walk in, make a threat, and get dismantled in 5 sentences. And in Harlem in 1935, what people saw mattered more than what was written in files. Marcus Webb stepped into the doorway, not aggressive, just present, blocking the exit. Harold Duncan moved to the bar, positioned so Divine's men couldn't approach without crossing the entire room. Estelle Price watched from her table, her face neutral, her presence a reminder. This wasn't just Bumpy. This was the network. Divine looked at Leonard. Leonard looked at the floor. "You flipped him," Divine said quietly. "I gave him a choice," Bumpy replied. "You gave him a threat. There's a difference." Divine's voice hardened. "This isn't over." "Yes," Bumpy said. "It is." He gestured toward the door. "You can leave now. Take your men. Take your plan. But understand something." He stepped closer. "Next time someone tries to pressure one of mine, I won't build a stage. I'll just close the door, and you won't like what happens in private." Divine held Bumpy's gaze for 3 long seconds. Then he turned, walked out. His men followed. The room stayed silent until the front door of the club closed. Then, slowly, the noise returned. Conversations resumed. Glasses clinked, but everyone in that room knew they'd just witnessed something. Not violence, something more dangerous. A demonstration of control. Clara Washington stood at the coat check, watching the room settle. A man walked past her, heading for the exit. He paused, looked back at the private dining room, and said to no one in particular, "That's the kind of thing you tell your grandkids about." Clara didn't respond, but she wrote the date on a napkin and tucked it into her apron. She had a feeling she'd want to remember this night. A moment only becomes legend if people see it, and people saw. The Lenox Social Club wasn't just a venue that night. It was a witness box. Everyone in that room, the bartenders, the waiters, the regulars nursing drinks in corner booths, they all carried the story out into Harlem. By Saturday morning, 3 different versions were circulating. By Sunday, the core details had settled into a single narrative. Bumpy Johnson had caught a leak, set a trap, and dismantled an outside operator in front of a room full of people. No violence, no theatrics, just strategy. And the line, "A man talks, paper remembers," became shorthand for the entire operation. Some accounts suggest the line was planned. Others say it came to Bumpy in the moment. The records are unclear. But what's certain is this: the line stuck. It showed up in conversations, in warnings, in the kind of backroom advice older operators gave to younger ones. It became part of Harlem's vocabulary because it captured something true. In a world where information moved faster than money, the person who controlled the paper controlled the game. And Bumpy had just proven he controlled the paper. The FBI, monitoring from a distance, noted the shift in their reports. Surveillance teams found their sources drying up. Informants stopped returning calls. The Russian name, the one that had started the whole panic, disappeared from conversations entirely. Not because it wasn't real, but because no one wanted to be the next Leonard Pitts. And that's where the story turns. The rumors moved through Harlem like weather. By Monday morning, you couldn't walk 2 blocks without hearing some version of the story. In barbershops, men debated whether Leonard had flipped voluntarily or under pressure. In diners, people wondered what happened to Divine after he left the club. In the policy offices, the runners and clerks worked quieter, more carefully, suddenly aware that every detail mattered. The story wasn't just about Bumpy, it was about the system. About what happened when you trusted the wrong person, or leaked to the wrong heirs, or thought you could move on Harlem without understanding its rhythm. Clara Washington heard 4 different versions of the story, before her shift even started. By Wednesday, a regular at the coat check asked her if she'd been there that night. She nodded. What was it like? Clara thought for a moment. Quiet, she said. That's what made it scary. Inside Bumpy's operation, the reckoning was quieter but sharper. Marcus Webb called a meeting with the runners and clerks. Didn't yell, didn't threaten, just laid out the new rules. From now on, if you have a problem, debt, pressure, anything, you bring it inside. You don't solve it yourself. You don't go to strangers. You come to us. A pause. Because if you don't, and we find out later, it won't be a conversation. It'll be a consequence. The room stayed silent. Everyone understood. Leonard Pitts wasn't in that meeting. He'd left Harlem 2 days after the trap. Some accounts suggest Bumpy gave him money and a train ticket. Others say Leonard just disappeared, too ashamed to stay. The records are unclear, but what's certain is this. Leonard's name became a cautionary tale, a reminder that desperation, if not handled carefully, could turn into betrayal, and betrayal in Harlem had a long memory. Meanwhile, across town, Devine sat in a rented office, staring at a phone that wasn't ringing. His backers, the out-of-town interests who'd hired him to pressure Bumpy, weren't happy. The plan had been simple. Create chaos, force mistakes, open the door for new management. Instead, Devine had walked into a public humiliation. And worse, he'd revealed his hand. Now Bumpy knew who he worked for, knew their methods, knew their pressure points, which meant the next move would be harder, maybe impossible. One of Devine's men, a quiet, methodical type named Louis Kern, sat across from him. What do we do now? Louis asked. Devine didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about Bumpy's face in that dining room. Calm, patient, unshakable, the kind of face that didn't make mistakes. We pull back, Devine said finally. Regroup. Wait for a different opening. And if there isn't one, Devine looked at him. Then we walk away. Because going after someone like that without a perfect plan, that's not business, that's suicide. Louis nodded slowly. Devine stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city, and for the first time in years, he felt something he didn't like feeling. Respect for an opponent. The long-term impact of that February night rippled through Harlem for months. The FBI, frustrated by the sudden silence, reassigned their surveillance teams. The Russian name never appeared in another file. Historians debate whether the name itself was ever real or if it was just a piece of misdirection, a way to draw out anyone who might be listening too closely. The records are unclear. But what's certain is this. After February 1935, Bumpy Johnson's reputation shifted. He was no longer just a policy operator. He was a strategist, someone who understood that power wasn't about being the loudest or the most violent. It was about controlling information, reading patterns, setting traps so carefully that your opponent walked into them willingly. And that reputation, built on one quiet night in a Harlem social club, would define him for the rest of his career. The community felt it too. The panic that had been building since January, the fear that the whole system was about to collapse, started to ease. Not because the danger was gone, but because people believed again that someone was in control, that the rhythm would hold. Clara Washington kept the napkin with the date on it. Years later, when her granddaughter asked her about Harlem in the 1930s, Clara would pull it out and tell the story. Not the violent parts, not the criminal parts, just the part about watching a man stand in a room full of pressure and say 5 words that changed everything. A man talks, paper remembers. And her granddaughter would ask what it meant. Clara would smile. It means the smartest people don't need to shout. And that's where the story turns. By March, the streets had settled. The federal surveillance cars stopped circling. The phones rang normal again. The money moved smooth. But underneath the calm, everyone understood something had changed. Harlem had watched one of its own get tested, not with violence, not with spectacle, but with strategy, and come out stronger. And that kind of victory mattered more than territory. It mattered more than money. It was proof that intelligence, patience, and control could outmaneuver brute force. And in a world where power was always shifting, that proof was everything. Bumpy Johnson didn't celebrate. He just went back to work. Back to the ledgers, the envelopes, the quiet meetings, back to the rhythm. Because the rhythm, in the end, was what kept Harlem standing. But power is never static. And the people who wanted what Bumpy had built, they didn't stop wanting it. They just started planning differently. Because if February 1935 taught them anything, it was this. You couldn't pressure Bumpy Johnson from the outside. You had to become part of the inside first, and somewhere in New York, in a room Bumpy didn't know about yet, someone was already working on that plan. Bumpy's trap worked because he controlled the information flow. But what would you have done if you were divine? Walk away like he did, or double down and risk everything? Let me know in the comments.